Good afternoon. My name is Brandon Pontiro, and today I'll be presenting using information in sales presentations for AEB 3341, Selling Strategically. Again, my name is Brandon, and this is my sales technique video project. So first, I think it is important to establish what exactly information is. Using the dictionary definition, information is it's facts provided or learned about something or someone, simply. So we're kind of all clear as far as what information is, but what's really interesting to me is the business dictionary definition of information. As you can see there, information is data that is accurate and timely, specific and organized for a purpose, presented within a context that gives it meaning and relevance, and can lead to an increase in understanding and decrease in uncertainty. I think this is very important to kind of understand and recognize in any selling situation before, during, and after your presentation as a seller. Because these criteria that the business dictionary definition provides, it can really kind of make the difference in your sales presentation, because of course you want it to meet all of these kind of requirements. And while it is the dictionary definition, you can kind of take it as requirements and things you want to look for in the information that you're presenting as a seller. One thing I really want to touch on is the idea of information overload. We really do live in an era where information and data kind of reign supreme, especially with how much use the internet gets. And as you can see there, for example, from Science Focus, they estimate that just on the internet, between what they call the big four, Amazon, Facebook, Google, and Microsoft, there's 1.2 million terabytes of information. Now, that's just a lot of information. It's almost difficult to comprehend, and that number is only increasing by the day, by the hour, by the minute. Information is constantly being utilized and inputted on the internet, but as as consumers, we're receiving information on products from not just from the internet, but from television, social media networks, which is the internet, but as well as many more. Think about, as a consumer, all the different ways that you get information, even by word of mouth from other consumers, is a way to get information. But now in 2018, heading into 2019, consumers are more informed than ever before, and this is something to really be conscientious of and be aware of as a seller in today's selling environment, because this is really important to know, especially when making a presentation. So what exactly is useful information? Like I mentioned, there's a lot of information out there, and a lot of it isn't useful, or it doesn't help the consumer or even yourself, the seller, in any way. So it's very important to know not just what information is readily available, but what information is useful to you in your selling presentation and your selling situation. So as a seller, it is kind of important to go back to that business definition. I just want to highlight it one more time, just to kind of hammer it home that I think it's really important. Again, accurate and timely, specific and organized for a purpose, presented within a context that gives it meaning and relevance, and can lead to an increase in understanding and decrease in uncertainty. And I do want to highlight that last one, increased in understanding and decreased in uncertainty, because there's a lot of selling situations where that might be the goal, to increase the understanding from the consumer to the from the consumer, from the work, from what you're saying and what you're telling them, to in order to buy the product that you're selling them or the service that you're selling them. And you never want uncertainty in a seller. As consumers, we know that we're not going to purchase a lot of things if we're uncertain about it. There's maybe a few exceptions to that, but for the most part, we really want to increase that understanding and decrease that uncertainty, and again, follow the rest of those requirements as it's laid out in the business definition of information. And really, how can useful information be identified? We know it's out there, but how can we identify it among all of the information that we're getting from so many different avenues? Really, it comes down to research and planning before your presentations. Really, not just research of what you are selling, but who you are selling to. It is so important to go into that presentation with a very good background of knowledge about what you're selling. There's so much information out there, like I've mentioned, but you as a seller have to decipher what is useful and what is not useful in these particular situations, because it kind of varies in certain selling situations. So you really have to identify and do your research and do your planning before you get to that presentation. But like I'll mention a little bit later, there's also some things that you can do during your presentations in order to identify whether the information that you have will be useful. So I really wanted to kind of talk about the idea of prospecting and the importance of prospecting when it comes to information. Like our textbook mentions, the Selling Today by Ahern, Manning, and Reese, prospecting is identifying and developing potential customers. So this is pretty straightforward, and this can be used in many different selling situations, and it's kind of the pre-presentation part of the selling process. But I also think some of the practices can be used in your presentations when delivering information to these potential customers and to these prospects. So of course, part of this prospecting process and developing customers is doing research to identify which information that you have that's readily available will be useful in acquiring these customers, or continuing to maintain relationships with these customers. Whatever your goal is out of a presentation, prospecting is very important when it comes to that information. Like we know, particular information will not be useful for certain customers. If you're trying to sell a particular baby formula, a new baby formula, you are not going to want to present information to a father of 3 children who are in college. This information is deemed useless to this person. It's just a waste of your time, and it's not going to accomplish your goal as a seller, especially as prospecting goes before your presentation and who you want to deliver this information to. Part of the struggle is just identifying who you want to deliver this information to in order to, and make a sale or acquire a new customer. So information in different selling situations. As we all know, there are many different selling situations that you can be a part of, whether it be determinant off of what the product or service that you are selling is, who you are selling it to, where you're selling it. All of these are variables in these different selling situations. So I just want to highlight a few of the common, the obvious situations that we could be in. So what's the product you are selling? This is a factor in the information that you provide in your presentations. Technology versus food or entertainment, appliances, anything you could possibly think of buying or selling. I think information can be used differently in these situations. For example, if you're selling an iPhone versus a box of Cheerios, you are going to want to provide more information from an iPhone seller to the consumers, because they're going to want to A, know more information, B, they might not be as informed as they might be with Cheerios. So as you can see, this is a situation where you will really want to probably provide more information, more in-depth information, so they really get a good idea of what they're buying. A different situation is if you are selling to a first-time buyer. In this case, more information may be required because they don't have any prior knowledge of the product or service that you are selling them. You also might want to, present this information at its most basic level, because they are new to the market or new to the product, whatever it may be. It's really important to tailor this information to them. In this case, are they a recurring customer? Less information may be required because they might already know what they're buying, what they're speaking with you about. This happens maybe a lot in relationship selling, and which I'll mention a little bit later. But in relationship selling, you probably have an established customer or established customer base that knows exactly what product or service they are getting, so you can tailor that information that way as well. Is it a new product into the market that you're selling? This may require more information as well. Similar to being a first-time buyer, this is kind of on the seller's end where they're introducing something where they want to make sure the consumers are well informed when it comes to what they're buying, as opposed to something that's been in the market for a long time and doesn't really need much information in order to effectively sell. As I mentioned, how the relationship selling and how information affects the relationship selling. Well, personally, I believe information can make a selling situation less personal. Relationship sellers kind of often thrive off of that personal aspect of a selling situation, maintaining customers and maintaining relationships. So there must be a balance between presenting enough information in order to secure the sale, as well as maintaining that relationship for future sales and hopefully utilizing that relationship for a while as a seller. So it may be simple to say, but information can be boring or not useful if given too much of. So that's why it's important to identify the relationship that you're in with the customer and not letting it affect your sales in that way. Another great way to identify which information or how much information is useful is by asking questions to the customer before and during the presentation to kind of uncover what the buyer knows as well as what the needs are. So this is a simple selling tactic and just the most simple of selling situations, but you can use it in identifying this information and implementing it properly. This really allows you to tailor the information in your presentation to these uncovered needs or these questions that the customer has. So you've really got to, again, have the most information you can available that's relevant, but making sure it's adaptable and you can kind of think on your feet in these situations. And finally, just to kind of conclude, is less more. So it's less information, better in some situations. Well, I think we've established that information can be used on a situational basis. It's really kind of up to the exact selling situation that you're in. And like I mentioned, research and planning are the most important. That's the one thing you can control. You can't really control what the consumers already know or what they're looking to know, but you can control how much effort you put into your research and planning. And again, going back to that business definition, it's always important to keep in mind and to ask yourself as a seller those aspects of information and data that you have. So in an era of information overload, sometimes less information, it can definitely be more beneficial. So it's just always important to, keep that in mind, keep that business definition of information in mind, and, going from there in your presentations and being able to think on your feet and adapt to, different situations. And these are the sources that I use in my presentation. Everybody, thanks so much. Have a great night.